Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I came across a really interesting post by Elder Clark G. Gilbert on Facebook today, and it answers a really important question that I've had about how the church is taking practical steps to prepare for the second coming. I've had this question for a while now, and it was really satisfying to find it in this video. I didn't think that this video would have anything to do with the second coming. But let me first read the text of the post, and then we'll read the transcript, and I'll share some additional thoughts. He said, I recently met with the entire Africa West area presidency, which reaffirmed how grateful I am to witness the majesty of this moment of growth in the church. We recognize that phrase, the majesty of this moment. It comes from President Nelson's big Second Coming talk in the October 2024 General Conference. All right, continuing. Elder Kiyungu is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Elder Ojedirin is from Nigeria. And Elder Morrison is from Ghana. I love these men and am inspired by the impact their leadership is having. In a recent visit, we discussed the growth of the church in the Africa West area, the impact BYU Pathway is having, and the strength of the seminary program in the lives of our youth. And there it is, BYU Pathway. This is the question I've been having for a while now. The church has been connecting BYU Pathway and BYU Idaho and just higher education with the second coming. That the youth of the church that obtain a higher education, that this is somehow preparing for the second coming. This is my spreadsheet called quotes second coming. And you can see starting in column E, I have these different categories or way that I've categorized these quotes. And I've noticed that there's been a lot of talk about education and the second coming. And I've assumed that maybe it has something to do with the destruction of the wicked and rebuilding the world in the aftermath of that. There's going to be a lot of jobs that are suddenly open because certain people will not be here anymore. And maybe there's going to be a lot of challenges to just recover. I don't know, something along those lines. We've also come across a quote from the president of BYU Pathway in which he was talking about BYU Pathway helping in build Zion right now. So those are like the only two things that I felt like something was missing. And it turns out that I was right. But look at this really quick. So here's a quote talking about BYU helping to prepare for the second coming. Here's one about BYU Hawaii, BYU Pathway Worldwide, the church education system, which includes institutes and seminaries, BYU, education in general, and the church education system, BYU Pathway Worldwide, and education in general, church education system, BYU Pathway Worldwide, and education in general. And we're actually going to read this quote later on, just as a refresher. This is the one that I was just talking about building Zion, and how does BYU Pathway Worldwide help to build Zion? Well, before we get to that, let's go to my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 409 for Millennium, missionary work, and influx of converts. Okay, so this is the transcript from the Facebook video by Elder Clark G. Gilbert. It starts off with him. He's talking to the Africa West area presidency. Elder Gilbert, well, today's a real opportunity. We have the whole Africa West area presidency here in Salt Lake. Tell us a little bit about the Africa West area, what's included in the area. Elder Kiyungu, yeah, the Africa West area is growing so fast. Okay, this is kind of, this right here, growth, this is going to be the central concept of this video. growth and education, but education because of growth. Look, he continues. It's really incredible the things we are witnessing. We're able to create 15 stakes. Elder Gilbert, 15 stakes in your time, like serving as area president. Elder Kuyungu, yes, 7 missions. And we are building on the leadership development because we are trying to understand how to support that growth. Okay, now this is something I have not considered up until now. Growth that we're seeing right now in having enough leadership. We have kind of touched on that topic before because of something that Bradley R. Wilcox said, and we'll read that too. But I never thought about it in the context of education. I thought, well, yeah, as the church grows, and especially after the second coming, when there's a large influx of converts, everyone that's already been in the church, especially if you've been like a lifelong member or you've been in the church for a long time, there's probably going to be a lot asked of you, and you're probably going to be asked to step up and be a leader. But I've never thought about the education component. So let's continue. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Okay, Elder Gilbert. Earlier this year, Elder Ojedarin, I was with you in Lagos, Nigeria, and we were working on the growth of BYU Pathway in the area. Tell us just a little bit about the impact BYU Pathway is having on the saints in the area. Elder Ojedarin. The BYU Pathway is a remarkable blessing in the lives of the members of the Africa West area. About 1/3 of the global enrollment that is happening in Africa West area. We are having an increased membership, and a lot of people are joining the church. And the good thing is, this is helping members to be spiritually and temporally self-reliant as disciples of Jesus Christ. Elder Gilbert. So when Elder Kuyungu says the church is growing so fast, we need to develop leaders. And you're saying one of the ways that's happening is through education, and in particular through BYU Pathway. Elder Ojedarin, exactly. And that is really helping to develop future leaders. And with that, the Lord is building a solid foundation for the kingdom in the area. Okay. It makes sense. A lot of times I tend to think of things through a military lens because I was in the U.S. Army. And in the military, I think this is all militaries worldwide. If you take all the service members, there's 2 basic divisions. You have enlisted service members, and then above them, you have the officers. And I'm sure for any given military, it's probably a requirement to have a higher education, to be an officer, to have a college degree. And so in the church, when you think about different leadership positions, like it's not a requirement to have a college degree to be a bishop, for example, but it probably helps. It is a spiritual assignment, but I think the more education you have, the more prepared you are to be a leader. I think that's just how it works. It's like this in the military. It's like this in the business world. For a lot of positions, especially if you're going to be an executive, you have to have a college education. It helps. And I've kind of like thought about it like this. So here you have the different ranks for officers in the U.S. Army. I kind of feel like if you were to think about priesthood offices as well as callings, I feel like the elders would kind of be like the lieutenants, second lieutenant and first lieutenants, that the bishop would basically be like a captain, because in the army, the base unit is a company, and the commander of the company is typically a captain. Although I have seen it be like a first lieutenant before, I think. I was only in the army for one enlistment, but I seem to recall that being the case one time. But typically it's a captain. So I feel like this would roughly line up with the church and being a bishop, a company commander, and being a captain. And then majors, I feel like that would be more like high priests, patriarchs maybe. But then lieutenant colonel, it seems like in my time in the army, like, so you have companies, and then above that you have battalions. But a battalion, you could say, is kind of like a stake. And so lieutenant colonel would be a pretty good analog for like a stake president. That might also be a good analog for like a mission president. And then if you go on up to the next rank, colonel, I feel like that would match up pretty well with 70s. And then once you get to general, these, lower ranks would probably match up well with, like junior apostles, and then on up to senior apostles. And then maybe once you get to like 4-star general, that would be like the first and second counselor, the first presidency. And then, excuse me, general of the army, 5-star general would be like the president of the church. Something like that. But the point is, this just helps me think about it. If we're going to have a lot of growth, then yes, it would probably be a good idea to have people who are educated, even though it's not a requirement to be a bishop, a stake president. It helps. It definitely helps, I think. It helps. Getting a higher education helps with leadership, I believe. Just in general. I'm speaking in general. So let's think about some of the things that we've heard. Let's go to what President Nelson said on social media. This is a post from November 1st, 2018, his first year as president of the church. He said, "We're just at the exponential phase of growth, and it will continue. The Lord has said, I will hasten my work in its time, and he makes good on his promises." Now, I don't know if that exponential growth is expected to happen now, before the second coming. We have hit record-breaking numbers. I've covered that in recent videos. We have seen a record number of new converts within a 12-month period. For 2025. And who knows what this year is going to bring in the next and the next. So maybe we're starting to see that. Maybe some of it includes the second coming, because now I want to go over to the quotes A through Z spreadsheet. And on the same row, I want to read this quote from Bradley R. Wilcox, who at the time was second counselor in the Young Men General Presidency. This is an Ensign College devotional, October 12th, 2021. The name of the talk is There is a Hurry. Okay. I'm just going to read probably just this paragraph here. Gathering Israel is about preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And that is how we do it. If 1 million people wanted to join the church tomorrow, would we be ready? Would we have enough bishops, Relief Society presidents, stake presidents, young women presidents? Would we have enough full-time missionaries? Would we have enough full tithe payers? No, we would be totally swamped. And that's just 1 million. So what's going to happen when Christ comes and says, hello, by the way, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's what he's going to say. Are we going to be ready when 2 billion people want to join the church in one day? We have to be ready. Jesus isn't going to come to watch the church fail. He's going to come when the church is ready to succeed. Now, this is the key part for this video, what he's about to say here. When we have a leadership base strong enough all over the world that we will be able to welcome everyone into the church. And we will be able to, as a church, as Israel, gather all of God's children on both sides of the veil home to Him. So, a leadership base. Let's go back to this recent post by Elder Clark G. Gilbert. And let's actually read. Yeah, let's start here with Elder Gilbert. So, when Elder Kayungu says, the church is growing so fast, we need to develop leaders. And you're saying one of the ways that's happening is through education, and in particular through BYU Pathway. And then Elder Ojiran says, exactly. And that is really helping to develop future leaders. And with that, the Lord is building a solid foundation for the kingdom in the area. A solid foundation of leadership because of education. Back to Bradley R. Wilcox, it's very close to what he said. When we have a leadership base strong enough all over the world that we will be able to welcome everyone into the church, and we will be able to, as a church, as Israel, gather all of God's children on both sides of the veil home to Him. So, all this talk about higher education and the second coming, now it makes even more sense. So you had my initial speculation that maybe has something to do with rebuilding the world after the second coming, after the destruction of the wicked, which that could be one reason. Number two, and we're going to cover this in a minute, but what the president of BYU Pathway Worldwide said about how it helps build Zion. But now number three, that it helps create leaders for the church. And you can see that there's a need right now in Africa. It makes me think a little bit about Zion's camp, how Joseph Smith, he led the brethren from Ohio all the way down into Missouri and as far as Clay County, just a little bit short of the Missouri River in Jackson County. And how that gave Brigham Young experience when it was time to move the saints across the plains from Nauvoo to Utah. And I wonder if we're getting some of that experience now as we're seeing explosive growth in places like Africa. In BYU Pathway is getting all these students in that area, and then maybe lessons are being learned right now for the church. And when Christ comes, it's going to be, it's really going to be showtime. I think it'd be worth it, before we read that quote from the president of BYU Pathway Worldwide, I think it'd be worth it to read this other quote from Bradley R. Wilcox. This is from a fireside. This was posted on YouTube. There's the reference down there. It's on the YouTube channel called Live Music Therapy. And the name of the video, is Brad Wilcox, 12 Tribes of Israel Breakdown. Amazing talk. Okay. We're going to read this paragraph right here in red. But when the second coming comes, that's when these tribes are going to give us a totally different organization, a different level of organization that's going to become very important. I mean, right now, we've got to get organized, because when Jesus comes and he says, by the way, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's what he's going to say. So do you think there's going to be a little interest in our church? Oh, yeah. Will we be ready to have 2 billion people join the church in one day? Will we have enough stake presidents? Will we have enough bishops? Will we have enough young women presidents? Will we have enough full-time missionaries? Will we have enough full tithe payers? We got to get with it. We got to get organized so that, now right here, when he says we got to get organized, I think about BYU Pathway Worldwide and BYU and the young adults of the church gaining a higher education. It seems like that's a part of it. We got to get organized so that when we have that huge influx into the church, it doesn't swamp us. We've got leaders all over the world who can handle that. So, Elder Darling, you're not going to Guatemala to baptize everybody. Now, that's what your mission president might say, and that's certainly what your zone leader is going to say. But really, you're there just to get things organized, bring people into the church, help them become leaders, help people back into the church, and help them become leaders, help youth become leaders, help other missionaries become leaders. You've got to strengthen this organization so when Jesus comes, that's when we're going to baptize everybody. And we've got to be ready for that. I'm not going to do it now, but I have all these quotes talking about the fact that our main time of missionary work is going to be in the millennium. That this is just what we have right now. In fact, I think I have one of those quotes right here. Yeah, Elder Bruce R. McConkie said, "What's going on right now is but the gleam of a star that soon will be hidden by the splendor of the sun in full blaze." He's talking about missionary work during the millennium. That's how it's going to contrast with what we're doing right now. So, leaders. That's what the church needs. A practical step to prepare for the second coming is developing leaders. And there's different ways to do that, including higher education. To finish off, let's just read this quote from President Brian K. Ashton, president of BYU Pathway Worldwide, and then his wife, Sister Melinda Ashton. I don't know if he's still the president of BYU Pathway Worldwide. I think that he is, but I haven't checked. But this is from, let's see, a BYU Pathway Worldwide devotional, September 20th, 2022. The name of the talk is Building Zion. Yeah, we may not read this whole thing, but let's start at the top. Sister Ashton, today we would like to talk about building Zion. Zion is the Lord's name for his people who are pure in heart. Zion can be both a place and a people. In its fullness, Zion is both a people among which and a place where Jesus Christ would feel comfortable, would be comfortable dwelling. President Ashton. Brothers and sisters, prior to the second coming of the Lord, an event that prophets have identified will come in the latter days, we will have to build Zion anew. By building Zion and observing the Lord's commandments, we will also be enabled to escape the judgments of God upon the wicked in the last days. Sister Ashton. Doctrine and Covenants 97 gives a list of requirements that Zion must fulfill so that she shall prosper and spread herself and become very glorious, very great, and very terrible. Those requirements include having a school or schools in Zion. In fact, the Savior declared, "I, the Lord, am well pleased that there should be a school in Zion." Elder Kim B. Clark, former commissioner of the church education system, taught, quote, "BYU Pathway is a school in Zion, wherever Zion is," end quote. Therefore, the requirements in Doctrine and Covenants 97 and the responsibility to help build Zion apply to BYU Pathway, its students, instructors, employees, missionaries, and academic partners. I'm going to skip down. We should have honest and broken hearts, contrite spirits, and observe our covenants even by sacrifice. BYU Pathway, then, must produce graduates who are covenant-keeping disciples of Jesus Christ, who are leaders in their homes, the church, and their communities. Now, it looks like we kind of had this answer all along, but I never really focused on that. I just highlighted this in red for this video. I didn't have this highlighted in red before, leaders. So the answer was kind of already there, but whenever I've covered this quote in the past, I was more focused on this part right here that we're about to read. But here it is, leaders in their homes and the church and in their communities. Okay, Sister Ashton, Elder D. Todd Christofferson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles gives us another answer to the question, what is our role in building Zion? He taught, Zion is Zion because of the character, attributes, and faithfulness of her citizens. Remember, the Lord called his people Zion because they were of one heart and one mind and dwelt in righteousness, and there were no poor among them. If we would establish Zion in our homes, branches, wards, and stakes, we must rise to this standard. It will be necessary, 1, to become unified in one heart and one mind, 2, to become individually and collectively a holy people, and 3, to care for the poor and needy with sufficient effectiveness that we eliminate poverty among us. Later on, it says those students in turn can help others to become self-reliant until there are no poor among us. Okay, so I think those are the 3 reasons, at least the 3 reasons that are currently on my radar, why there's all this emphasis on going to college, getting a higher education. So it's about strengthening the church, especially in areas that are experiencing a lot of growth. You have to have a solid leadership base. So it has to do with leaders for the church. It may have to do with rebuilding the world after the second coming. And then it also has to do with becoming a Zion people. That it's not just being of one heart, one mind, and it's not strictly spiritual. I mean, all commandments and everything are spiritual, but it's not just that. It's also having people in a position where they can be self-reliant, where they can provide for themselves and get jobs to support their families so that there's no poor among them. But it's really interesting. I wish I could, sit in on the conversations that are had at church headquarters when they're talking about things like BYU Pathway, because I'm sure that, man, if we were privy to all those conversations, I would just be like, it'd be so hard for me to cover all those, like make videos on all those there's probably so many gems from those private conversations. But like, I think about the development of BYU Pathway worldwide, maybe things that have been said prophetically about it, maybe discussions about the second coming and its place in helping to prepare the church and the world for the second coming. But I'm so happy that I found this, and now it makes just that much more sense. And, if between now and the second coming, we're just at the point of exponential growth, then I don't know, it's probably just all the more important that people gain a higher education. So anyway, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.